NYPD cop and a detective, and he said, you see different things. We see things differently than you. And he points out over here in this apartment, somebody was murdered, and over here something else happened. And civilians don't have a tendency to think like that. Cops are very cynical. People that know what I know and write about, what I write about. I mean, ever since I was a kid, I knew how dangerous this world can be and how careful people need to be, because murder exists. But you wouldn't believe the people that just go through life and that always happens to other people. There's no sense of concern. There's just, and many of them get through life without anything ever happening. But some of these people are taken by surprise and murdered very easily. And I'd like to see people not to walk in fear, but become more aware of how, vulnerable things can turn against them if they're not doing everything they need to do to protect themselves. And sometimes there are people like this girl. I mean, this young woman that was killed in Bardstown. I mean, she had to open the shop. She was there. There's nothing really that she could have done, as far as I know, to avert it. But you'd be surprised at the amount of murder that occurs with people who actually and unwittingly aid killers in the actual homicide by doing things like, leaving doors unlocked.
Yeah, you got into that a lot about Richard Chase. I mean, we didn't even do a full show on it, but you brought that up repeatedly, how Richard Chase, he would kind of pick his victims that way.
Oh, yeah. He looked for unlocked doors, and he got in through unlocked doors. And he had gone to some doors that were locked, and he just, moved on. And in this new book I write, there's a killer in the new book where it was his thing to only go into homes where he could easily get in without being heard, which would mean through an unlocked door. He looked for doors that were unlocked. When he found doors that were locked, he moved on, and he killed elsewhere. So it's, you wouldn't think that something so terrible could hinge on that, but sometimes it does.
So being as we're both in Louisville, I cannot, do this story without talking about the story that involved the Galt House. So feel free to tell that story as long or as short as you need to. But that part of the story, to me, I mean, we'll get to it, obviously, that part of the story. But that part of the story, I've thought about that for probably a year since I read the book. And I've gone back and listened to some podcasts that you've done over the last week or so, and it never fails to just make me think about it for long periods of time.
Yeah, well, okay, just to give people an idea who don't live in like the Louisville area or anywhere near Kentucky, Louisville's a nice city, mid-sized city, I guess, in the surrounding counties. We're about 1 million people. There was a fellow named Albert Bauer, Jr., and he was a young adult, and he had moved back home with his parents off of Bardstown Road near what they call Atherton High School in a really nice middle-class neighborhood. And he lived with his father, Albert Sr., and his mother. And he had issues. He had mental problems. And one night, the Jefferson County police got a call. That was at the time when there was Louisville, and it actually might be Louisville police. That probably that would be the Louisville cops. Today it's called Louisville Metro. The Jefferson County and the city cops are combined. But back then, it would have been the Louisville PD. They got a call that he said he had gotten home and his parents were murdered. And so that in the book, this is, I think, about the second chapter. It's titled Blood in the Moonlight. And I got the title from the cop that rolled up to the door to answer that call. And I got a picture of the book, and the house sits on a little bit of a hill. And the cop had to pull up in the driveway and then get out of his car. And he saw this man standing there that turned out to be Albert Bauer, Jr. And the cop said, at first sight, his jacket looked to be wet, but it was actually blood. And but in the moonlight, it just looked wet. And the cop, he enters the scene with Bauer, and the the cop looks around. He's not the detective, but he looks around. And I had spoken to this guy on the phone before years ago when I was writing this case. And he said, I said, that had to have been creepy to go into that house. He said, it was. He said, that he's been in other things that were creepy, where no murders had happened to where he had to go into a building with his canine dog, that it would be, they're searching for somebody and it's dark and stuff like that. But he said it was terrible. But really, the house itself, after he got in, they entered through the kitchen, the creepy feeling soon gave way to horror, because he could see that what had happened here was no ordinary burglary where something went wrong and somebody got killed, because Albert Bauer's mother had been just horribly slaughtered. And I've seen the crime scene photos. I mean, there was blood on not just on the floor, on the walls, some on the ceiling, on the cabinets. There was blood everywhere. And she was found, she had been stabbed so many times. And there was a piece of cutlery, almost like a turkey fork. I don't know what you call them, but it's a big fork that you stab into the bird or piece of meat or whatever you're doing. And that was that had been in her, and there was either that was bent. I'd have to check my book again, or maybe one of the long knives was bent. But I think it was the fork that was bent. But whoever killed his mother did so with a great deal of rage. And of course, when the detectives got there, they said the same thing. His father was found in the front of the house by the front door, and you could see he was trying to make his way to escape. In fact, let me go back a second. That night when they were murdered, they had been to a dinner at the Elks Lodge, because the father was a Jefferson County sheriff's employee, and they had this big dinner and they had a nice night. They came home, and I think Albert Bauer came home after that, and some kind of argument erupted, and apparently it erupted in the basement, but and maybe it continued upstairs with the father. They're not sure who he killed first, but the father was found. He had a dent in his head that matched a now misshapen pewter mug that they located, that his son had hit him with, and he had also strangled him. And like I say, he was laying by the front door. His father must have grabbed a pistol too, because they found the pistol. And as I recall, I have to check my book again, but it's been years since I've written this. The trigger guard, I think, was bent. And I think the pistol was found cocked, and I think it had been discharged too, but nobody had a bullet wound. So anyway, so he managed to do this, and so they had. I remember by this time, technicians have shown up, the detectives have shown up. One detective starts the investigation in the basement. The other one is investigating the upstairs and the outside. Bauer said that the intruders must have, left and gone like over a fence or whatever. But they said that when the dog tracked, and they ran this dog twice, that all it did was come out of the home, circle, go over to the fence line, circle all the way back, and go back into the house. And I believe it was through that same kitchen door. It didn't take the detectives long to know that Albert Bauer Jr. killed his parents. Now, they didn't charge him with that immediately because they had found Quaaludes and some other drugs, and this might have been a mistake on the part of the cops, but they decided to only charge him with possession of illegal substances. And when they wanted him to have, and so he went to jail that night and all that stuff. And when they wanted to keep him with a really high bail, the judge wouldn't permit it, and he said, I can't permit it because the only thing you charge him with is for these illegal substances. And if you wanted to really make it a really high bond to where his parents, or I mean not his parents, but other family members could match it, wouldn't be able to match it, then you'd have to charge him with like murder. And they weren't quite ready to do that. So he walked with a lower bail, and his attorney got him a hotel room on the 23rd, I think, floor of the hotel. And the attorney's name, I think, was Michael Green. I'm not sure. That's it. Anyway, so he let the detectives know exactly where he was being housed. And he was in there, and he didn't tear up the room. He didn't do anything. And, people thought, I guess, that things were going to proceed normally, and he's going to be rearrested for the murder of his parents. But he decided, Bauer Jr. decided not to go that way. And so he ran. It's really odd. You think maybe he could find a better way to kill himself, but I guess he had no other options, and he just decided to do this. But he took a running leap through the window. And I say in my book that he had what is known as a controlled fall, which not everybody does that. He probably lucked into it, in as much as when he came out through the glass, he was able to come out with his head and feet in the right position, as if he had just run through the window without the glass being there. And he started to fall. Now, during the 23-story drop, he drifted a little bit, so he wasn't moving in exactly a straight line, but he was still falling feet first. And he ended up hitting the first floor, because the Galt House, it comes out. You hit the first floor, and it's got other rooms that go out beyond the main tower of the hotel. And he ended up hitting feet first and going through the roof of the first floor and getting stuck in it halfway through. Of course, he was killed on impact. And there was a maid who was in there. It was like not a ballroom, but like a meeting room with a lot of tables and stuff. There's a couple pictures in the book of him being lowered out of the ceiling and then lying dead on the floor. And there was some water that had been dripping there, and she came in there, and anyway, she saw this, went out screaming, and they, of course, the manager went down there, and then the police were called. By this time, it's early morning, and it's getting light, and the detectives who had come in, they said when they got the call, when they heard about, they left the police headquarters, which is downtown. They looked in the direction of the Galt House, and they could see curtains flapping through a window, and they couldn't tell it was the 23rd floor, but they said, well, that's Bauer. That's him. That's why you don't open your windows there. So that's him. So of course they got there, and so with Bauer Jr., he was posthumously charged with the murder of his, mom and dad. I remember I talked with, I think it was the uncle a little bit when I was doing research, and I wanted to know if they wanted to contribute anything to the story, but they did not, and that's not unusual. But that's what they said. And most people that don't want to participate, won't, and they'll be upfront about it. And but that's what happened there. And then later I can tell you about the hassle of even being able to write about Monica Berger. But the Albert Bauer case is a real strange one, and it's pretty typical for somebody with the type of psychosis that he had, with violent tendencies. Families have to be very, very careful of those things. And I had a brother who had lost his mind through a lot of hallucinogenic drugs, and he never came back. And he lived with my parents for a while I was still growing up, and he was 4 years older than me. And then once I became an adult, I left, and I was just doing